안녕하십니까, 정철입니다. 정철의 요셉이야기 영어로 통독 암송 24번째 시간입니다. 말씀은 Genesis 37, 34 through 35a, 창세기 37장 34절에서 35절 앞부분까지입니다. 자, 다 함께 구해주실까요? 준비 시작. 성령 충만 영어 능통와. 지난 시간의 내용을 보면은 he recognized it, 그는 그걸 알아봤습니다. and said, 그리고 말하기를 it is my son's robe, 이게 내 아들의 로브다. some ferocious animal, 어떤 흉포한 짐승이 has devoured him, 그를 잡아먹었구나. 조셉은 has surely been torn to pieces, 틀림없이 갈기갈기 찢겼을 거야. 자, 오늘의 내용.
Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted.
자, 볼까요?
Then Jacob tore his clothes.
Then, 그리고는 제이콥은 tore his clothes, 자기 옷을 찢었습니다. 슬프고 화나고 비탄에 빠지고 절망에 빠지고 이랬을 때 옷을 찢는다고 그랬죠. Then Jacob tore his clothes, 자기 옷을 찢고
Put on sackcloth.
put on sackcloth, sackcloth를 뒤집어 쓰고, sackcloth라는 게 뭔가 하면은 우리말로는 보통 배옷이라고 번역들을 해놓는데 우리나라 배옷은 고급 옷이잖아요. 그죠? 그 배가 얼마나 비싼데? 안동포. 근데 이건 그런 배가 아니라 이 색이라는 거는 푸대. 색, 푸대. cloth는 천, 푸대천이니까 뭐예요? 거적을 뒤집어 쓰고, 보통 회개할 때 땅에다가 재를 뿌려놓고 거기에 이렇게 엎드려서 이러고 있잖아요. 여기다가 뭘 씌우는가 하면 거적을 씌우는 거예요. 거적. 이 거적을 쓰고서 우는 거예요. 이게 애통의 표시거든. 애통. Then Jacob tore his clothes, 자기 옷을 찢어버리고 이 sackcloth를 뒤집었을 때는 자료를 보니까 맨몸에 뒤집었는데 맨몸. 속 안에 내복 입고 이러는 게 아니라 맨몸에 이 거친 그 푸대자루. 우리나라로 보면은 가마니 쪼가리 같은 거예요. 가마니 쪼가리. 그런 거를 뒤집어 쓰는 거예요. Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth,
And mourned for his son.
and mourned, 애통했습니다. For his son, 아이고 이렇게 하는 거, mourn. 애통하는 자는 복이 있나니, 우리 배웠죠? Blessed are those who mourn. mourn을 하는 자는 복이 있나니. Who and mourned for his son. 자기 아들을 위해서 애통했습니다. 얼마 동안?
Many days.
Many days. 수많은 날 동안 그치질 않고 계속 울부짖는 거예요. 그 사랑하는 아들이 죽였으니까 죽으면서 별의별 회한이 다 있겠죠. 아니, 그 불쌍한 어린 거를 혼자 보내가지고 얼마나 무서웠을까, 얼마나 아팠을까 그러면서 애통하는 거지. 자기 자책을 하면서 내가 왜 걔를 하인도 없이 혼자 보냈을까, 무기도 안 줘서 보냈는데 등등. 예, 그렇게 many days mourned for his son, 자기 아들을 위해서 많은 여러 날 동안 mourn, 애통했어요.
All his sons and daughters.
All his sons and daughters, 자기 모든 자기의 아들과 딸들이 얼마나 많겠어요? All his sons and daughters
Came to comfort him.
came to comfort him, 와서 to comfort him, 위로하기 위해서. 위로라는 것은 이 comfort라는 게요, come은 함께고 fort가 파워야. 파워. fort가 그 파워의 힘이야. 그래서 common together. 파워를, 힘을 함께 모으면 위로가 되는 거죠. 그죠? 힘을 한데 모으는. 음악 기호도 왜 포르테가 있잖아. 포르테. 파워를 넣어라. 크게 해라. 그에게 힘을 넣어주는 거 위로하는 거지. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him. 그를 위로하기 위해서.
But he refused to be comforted.
But he refused. 그는 refused. 거절했습니다. To be comforted. 위로 받기를 거절했어요. 위로 받는 것 자체를 refuse 했어요. 그러니까 울고 불고 애통해하면서 누가 와서 위로를 이제 이제 어떡합니까? 마음을 편히 가지세요. 그러면 다 거절하는 거예요. 저리 가라고. 시끄럽다고. 응? 그렇게 하는 거죠. 한번 다시 가봅시다.
Then Jacob tore his clothes,
Then Jacob tore his clothes. 자기의 옷을 찢고
put on sackcloth,
거적을 뒤집어 쓰고
and mourned for his son
mourned for his son. 자기 아들을 위해서
many days.
many days. 많은 날 동안 애통해 했습니다.
All his sons and daughters
그의 모든 아들과 딸들이
came to comfort him,
came to comfort him. 그를 위로하기 위해서 왔는데
but he refused to be comforted.
그러나 he refused. 거절했습니다. To be comforted. 위로 받기를 거절했습니다. 자, 들어볼까요?
Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted.
한 번 더.
Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted.
Listen and repeat.
Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted.
한 번 더.
Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted.
Shadowing.
Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted.
한 번 더.
Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted.
한 번 더.
Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted.
쉽고 재밌죠? 자, 엄지척 해서 좋아요 눌러서 추천해 주시고 아직도 구독 중에 아닌 상태로 듣고 계신 분은 구독을 눌러서 구독 중으로 바꿔주시고 그 다음에 공유를 눌러서 이 재미있는 강좌를 모르고 계시는 분들에게 이 강의 동영상 링크를 보내주시기 바랍니다. 자, 그럼 라이팅 끝까지 꼼꼼하게 하시고 약 10분간 반복 낭송해서 이 내용이 입에서 우리말처럼 나올 때까지 연습하시기 바랍니다. 자, 그러면 10계명을 함께 낭송하도록 하죠. The Ten Commandments. 1. You shall have no other gods before me. 2. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything, and you shall not bow down to them or worship them. 3. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. 4. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 5. Honor your father and your mother. 6. You shall not murder. 7. You shall not commit adultery. 8. You shall not steal. 9. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. 10. You shall not covet your neighbor's belongings.
Genesis 37. Joseph's Dreams. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him, and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Joseph sold by his brothers. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him, and throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted.